Captain Tom Reed stood on the bridge of the HSS Relic, his weathered hands resting on the metal railing that had been polished by 2 centuries of human touch. The old battleship hummed around him, its sounds as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Lights blinked on consoles that were built when humanity first reached for the stars. The ship was old, but it was still alive. "Final systems check complete, Captain," said Lieutenant Jane Foster from her station. "All green for our museum journey." Reed nodded but didn't speak. This would be the Relic's final voyage. A short, simple trip to the museum planet where it would sit forever, a reminder of wars long past. The thought made his chest tight. He had served on ships like this one when he was young. Modern ships were faster, sleeker, and packed with new tech, but none of them felt as solid as the Relic. "Quite a thing, isn't it?" asked Chief Engineer Mark Wilson as he joined Reed at the railing. 200 years old and still flying. They don't build them like this anymore." "No, they don't," Reed agreed. "New ships break if you look at them wrong." Wilson laughed. "That's why they gave us this job. Nobody else wanted to babysit an old ship on its last run." Reed looked around at his small crew. Most were young cadets getting their first taste of space, mixed with officers close to retirement like himself. Nobody important. Nobody the fleet would miss if things went wrong. "Captain," called the young communications officer, "we're getting a signal. It's a distress call." Reed straightened up. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a man with dust on his face and fear in his eyes. Behind him, people ran back and forth as alarms blared. "This is Governor Bell of Haven Colony. We are under attack. Multiple ships have entered our system. They've destroyed our orbital defenses and are threatening to bomb the surface if we don't surrender. We need immediate help." Reed stepped forward. "Governor, this is Captain Reed of the HSS Relic. We are picking up your distress call. What's your situation?" Relief flooded the man's face, then confusion as he saw the old-style uniforms and bridge. Is that a Heritage-class battleship? Are you from a history program?" "We're real enough," Reed said firmly. "And we might be the only help you're going to get." "Who's attacking you?" "They call themselves the Vex. 6 ships, maybe more. They've been hitting frontier colonies for months. Please, we have 10,000 civilians here." Wilson leaned close to Reed. "Haven Colony is 2 days away at our best speed. We're the only ship anywhere near them." Reed nodded and turned back to the screen. "Hold tight, Governor. We're changing course. The Relic is coming." After the call ended, Foster approached Reed. "Sir, with respect, the Relic is headed for decommissioning. We're not combat ready. We should call Fleet Command and let them handle this. By the time Fleet gets there, Haven will be ash," Reed said. He tapped a button on his chair. "Open a channel to Stellar Council headquarters." The screen changed to show a sleek, modern office where a man in a perfectly tailored suit sat at a desk that probably cost more than Reed's yearly pay. "Captain Reed," said Council Representative Davis with a thin smile. "Is the museum piece giving you trouble already?" Reed ignored the jab. "We've received a distress call from Haven Colony. They're under attack by Vex ships. We're the closest vessel and are changing course to respond." Davis's smile vanished. "You will do no such thing. The Relic is scheduled for decommissioning. It's a flying antique, not a warship. With respect, sir, there are civilians in danger, and sending in your outdated hulk won't help them," Davis cut in. "You'd just be adding your names to the casualty list. Continue to the museum as ordered. We'll dispatch proper ships to investigate." "Proper ships that won't arrive for a week," Reed said, his voice hard. "Haven doesn't have that long." Davis leaned forward. "Listen carefully, Captain. That ship belongs in a museum, not scattered across space as debris, which is exactly what will happen if you engage hostile forces. Your weapon systems have been deactivated for decades. Your shields are minimal. Your engines are from the last century. Sir, we can't just." That's an order, Captain. Stay on course for the museum planet. Davis out. The screen went dark. Silence fell over the bridge. Reed looked at his crew, some confused, some angry, all waiting for his decision. Navigation, he said finally. Plot a course for Haven Colony. Best possible speed. Foster stepped forward. Sir, our orders. I heard the orders, Reed said, and I'm choosing to ignore them. He looked around the bridge. I won't force any of you to come. Anyone who wants to use the escape pods before we change course has my permission. No one moved. Wilson broke into a wide grin. Well, I've been wanting to see what this old girl can really do. Reed nodded and sat in the captain's chair, feeling the worn leather conform to him. Set course for Haven. And Mr. Wilson, I suggest you start looking at those deactivated weapon systems. I have a feeling we might need them. As the massive ship turned slowly in space, Reed felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The relic had been built for war. It had protected human colonies when humanity was still new to the stars. Maybe it had one more fight left in it. All hands, he announced shipwide. This is the captain. We are responding to a distress call from Haven Colony. This mission is against direct orders. Anyone not comfortable with that should speak now. He paused. This old ship was built to protect people. That's what we're going to do. Read out. The ship hummed louder as its ancient engines powered up to full. Beneath the floor, machinery that had been dormant for decades came to life. The relic moved forward, accelerating toward danger while the stars streaked by outside. Reed watched his crew work with new energy. They had been given a ship no one wanted for a mission no one cared about. Now they had a chance to matter. They think we're just a museum piece, he said quietly. Let's go show them what history can do. The HSS relic dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that ran through its old metal hull. Captain Reed gripped his chair as the view screens showed the Haven system. Even from this distance, he could see the flashes of weapons fire around the colony planet. Scan complete, Captain, said Lieutenant Foster, her eyes fixed on her screen. 6 Vex warships in orbit around Haven. Their design is... I've never seen anything like it. Reed moved to her station. The ships on the screen were sleek and curved, almost beautiful in their deadly design. They looked like predators next to the blocky human buildings of the colony. No records in our database, Foster continued. These must be a new class. New to us, anyway, Reed said. Our records are as outdated as everything else on this ship. Wilson entered the bridge, his hands stained with engine grease. Captain, I've been looking at our weapon systems. They're not as deactivated as the Council thinks. Reed raised an eyebrow. Explain. When they converted the relic for ceremonial duty, they didn't remove the weapons. That would have been too much work. They just disconnected them and covered the ports. Wilson grinned. I've been reconnecting some things. Can we fight? Reed asked simply. Wilson's grin faded. Maybe. The main energy cannons are still offline, but I've got the point defense systems working. And there's something else. The old railgun. The what? Asked a young cadet. Kinetic weapon, Reed explained. Fires solid metal at high speed. They were replaced by energy weapons centuries ago. But it still works, Wilson insisted. And it doesn't need the main power grid. It has its own generators. Reed nodded slowly. Get it ready. He turned to the communications officer. Hail the colony. Governor Bell appeared on screen, looking worse than before. His face was blackened with smoke, and blood ran from a cut on his forehead. Captain Reed, thank God you're here. The Vex have destroyed our orbital platforms and bombed our main city. They're demanding our surrender. What do they want? Reed asked. Our resources, our people. Bell looked away briefly as something exploded nearby. They've been systematically hitting frontier colonies, taking what they want, and disappearing before the fleet responds. Foster moved closer to Reed. Sir, I'm checking the official reports. There's no mention of these attacks in any fleet communications. That's because no one is reporting them, Bell said bitterly. We've sent dozens of messages. The Council ignores them. Reed's jaw tightened. We're here now, Governor. We'll do what we can. As the communication ended, the young radar officer called out, Captain, one of the Vex ships is breaking orbit. It's heading toward us. Battle stations, Reed ordered. What little we have anyway. The bridge crew moved with purpose despite their limited options. The relic might be old, but its systems were built to be operated in combat. They're hailing us, the communications officer said. Reed straightened his uniform. On screen. The alien that appeared was humanoid, but with gray skin and multiple ridges on its skull. It wore an ornate uniform that seemed designed more for show than function. I am Admiral Crix of the Vex Expansion Fleet, the alien said in perfect English. Identify yourself. Captain Tom Reed of the human stellar ship Relic. You are attacking a human colony without provocation. Withdraw your forces immediately. Crix stared at Reed for a moment, then began to laugh. The sound was unpleasant, like grinding metal. Is this truly what Earth sends to defend its colonies? One ship, and such a ship. Crix moved aside to show others on his bridge. They were all looking at screens showing the relic. Some were laughing, others pointing. Perhaps we should capture it intact, Crix continued, as a museum piece to demonstrate how far behind humans have fallen. Reed kept his face blank. This is your only warning, Admiral. Leave this system. Crix's amusement vanished. You are either brave or stupid, human. I command 6 warships of the latest design. Your relic would make a fine addition to our collection of conquered species artifacts. The screen went dark. They're powering weapons, Foster reported. Reed turned to Wilson. Is that railgun ready? Not yet. 15 minutes, maybe less. We may not have 15 minutes. Reed looked at the tactical display. Helm, bring us around. Keep our strongest armor toward their ships. Foster, what can you tell me about their weapons? Foster studied her readings. Energy-based, highly focused. Our old shields aren't designed for that kind of attack. So we'll take some hits, Reed said calmly. This ship was built to take hits. The first blast from the Vex ship hit the Relic's side. The whole ship rocked. Alarms blared. Damage report, Reed ordered. Outer hull breached on deck 7, reported a crewman. Emergency bulkheads holding. Shields at 60%. One hit did that much damage. Reed asked. Their weapons are designed to cut through modern shields, Foster said. But they're actually less effective against our physical armor. Our hull is 10 times thicker than modern ships. Reed nodded. So we're old-fashioned. Let's use that. Helm, bring us closer to Haven's atmosphere. The relic turned slowly, its engines straining as it moved toward the planet. The Vex ship followed, firing repeatedly. Each hit shook the relic, but the old ship kept moving. What are you planning, sir? Foster asked. Modern ships rely on computers and targeting systems. Let's see how they handle something less predictable. Reed turned to the helm officer. When I give the word, cut all power except life support and artificial gravity. Make it look like they disabled us. The crew exchanged glances, but no one questioned the order. The Vex ship was closing fast, still firing. The relic shuddered with each hit. Hull breach on deck 4, reported a crewman. Automatic repair systems responding. Wilson looked up in surprise. The repair robots are working. Those haven't been used in 100 years. This old girl still has some tricks, Reed said. Status of the railgun. 7 minutes, Wilson promised. Reed watched the tactical display. The Vex ship was almost in position. Now, helm. Cut power. The lights on the bridge dimmed as the ship's engines went silent. The relic began to drift, seeming dead in space. On the screens, they watched the Vex ship slow its approach, clearly cautious despite its superior firepower. They're scanning us, Foster said quietly. Reed nodded. Let them think they've won. Wilson, get to that railgun. The moment it's ready, I want to fire. As Wilson hurried off the bridge, Reed watched the Vex ship draw closer, circling like a predator around wounded prey. Admiral Crix is hailing us again, said the communications officer. Reed straightened. Let's hear what he has to say about our ancient ship now. Admiral Crix's face filled the screen, his gray features pulled into what might have been a smile. Behind him, his crew worked at stations far more advanced than those on the Relic. Captain Reed, Crix said smoothly, it seems your ancient vessel couldn't withstand even our warning shots. How disappointing. Reed kept his face neutral. We've suffered some damage. Indeed, I can see that your power systems are failing. Allow me to make you an offer. Surrender your vessel, and I will spare your crew. They can join the other humans from the colony as our workers. From a side console, Foster signaled to Reed. The message on her screen read, Railgun at 90% power. That's generous of you, Admiral, Reed said, stalling for time. But I'm curious, why attack these colonies? What have they done to you? Crix waved a hand dismissively. Nothing. They simply have what we need, and your stellar council is too busy with politics to defend its outer territories properly. He leaned closer to the screen. Did you know that some of your own officials have been paid to look the other way? We've been raiding these colonies for months. Foster's eyes widened as she checked her console again. She typed quickly, searching records. He's right. Reports of attacks were filed but never acted on. Reed felt cold anger rising inside him. And you think that makes these people fair game? I think, Crix said, that those who cannot defend what they have do not deserve to keep it. You have 1 minute to surrender, Captain, or we will destroy what remains of your ship. The screen went dark. Reed turned to his crew. Status of the railgun. Ready to fire, came Wilson's voice over the comm. But we only have enough power for one shot before we need to recharge. Then we make it count. Reed looked at the tactical display. Their ship is holding position about 5 kilometers off our port side. Perfect target. Foster looked up from her analysis. Sir, I've been studying their ship. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, modern threats. But the railgun fires a solid tungsten rod. Their shields might not be calibrated for that kind of attack. Reed nodded. A very old trick that might just work against very new defenses. He turned to the weapons officer, a young cadet who looked nervous but determined. Target their propulsion systems. We want to disable, not destroy if possible. Aye, Captain. The cadet responded, hands flying over the targeting controls. All hands, prepare for reactivation of all systems on my mark, Reed announced shipwide. We'll only get one chance at this. The crew tensed as the seconds ticked by. On the view screen, the Vex ship hovered, its sleek form gleaming in the light of Haven's sun. Their minute is up, Foster said quietly. Reed nodded. They expect us to surrender or die. Let's show them a third option. He stood up. Mark. Power surged back through the Relic. Lights blazed to full brightness. Engines roared to life. And deep within the ship, the ancient railgun, a massive electromagnetic accelerator, powered up completely. Fire, Reed ordered. The entire ship shook as the railgun launched its projectile, a solid tungsten rod 3 meters long and half a meter wide. It crossed the space between the ships in less than a second, traveling at an appreciable fraction of the speed of light. The Vex ship had no time to react. The rod struck its propulsion section, passing through shields calibrated for energy weapons as if they weren't there. The kinetic energy released on impact was catastrophic. The Vex ship didn't explode dramatically. Instead, it simply came apart, breaking into large pieces that tumbled away from each other in silence. The bridge crew of the Relic stared in shock. Direct hit, the weapons officer reported unnecessarily. I didn't. Reed started, then cleared his throat. I didn't mean to destroy them completely. Wilson's voice came over the comm, sounding equally surprised. The railgun was more powerful than I calculated. These old systems were built to hit hard. Foster checked her sensors. Captain, the other Vex ships are breaking orbit around Haven. They're heading this way. Reed took a deep breath. So much for the element of surprise. How long until the railgun can fire again? 20 minutes minimum, Wilson replied. The power systems need time to recharge. We don't have 20 minutes, Foster warned. 5 Vex ships incoming. ETA, 8 minutes. The communications officer called out. Governor Bell is hailing us from the surface. Bell appeared on screen, his face showing a mix of shock and hope. Captain Reed. One of the Vex ships just disappeared. What happened? We happened, Reed said simply. But we've got more company coming. How are your people doing down there? We've taken heavy damage to the main settlement, but most civilians made it to the underground shelters. If you can keep the Vex busy, we might be able to get some of our own defenses back online. We'll do what we can, Reed promised. Read out. As the communication ended, Reed turned to Foster. Options. She studied the tactical display. The railgun is our best weapon, but it's not ready. Our point defense systems won't do much against their warships. We could try to run, but we'd never outpace those modern ships. Reed nodded, thinking. But we might outthink them. He moved to the center of the bridge. Wilson, are those repair robots still working? Yes, sir. Old but functional. Good. I need you to send them to the outer hull sections. Have them remove the cosmetic plates covering our old weapon ports. All of them. Wilson sounded confused, but most of those weapons don't work anymore. The Vex don't know that, Reed said. And I have another idea. Foster, what can you tell me about how the Vex communicate with each other? Foster checked her readings, standard subspace frequencies, but with heavy encryption. Can we jam those frequencies? She thought for a moment. Not with our modern systems, but the Relic has old-style broadband jammers. They're not selective like modern jammers. They just flood all frequencies with noise. Perfect, Reed said. Wilson, get those jammers online too. As the crew hurried to carry out his orders, Reed watched the approaching Vex ships on the tactical display. They were moving in a perfect formation, coordinating their approach with precision. They rely too much on their technology, he murmured. Time to introduce some chaos. The repair robots worked quickly, removing plates to expose weapon ports all around the Relic's hull. Many contained non-functional or disconnected weapons, but from the outside, they looked threatening enough. Jammers ready, Foster reported. Activate them, Reed ordered, and bring us about. Head straight for the Lid Vex ship. The Relic turned, its engines pushing the massive old ship forward with surprising speed. On the view screen, the 5 Vex ships suddenly broke their perfect formation, their movements becoming erratic. The jammers are working, Foster said. They can't communicate with each other. Reed allowed himself a small smile. Good. Let's see how they handle things when they have to think for themselves. The old battleship accelerated toward the enemy, its exposed weapon ports looking like the bared teeth of a predator from another age. The Relic charged forward, its massive hull cutting through space like a battering ram from another age. The 5 Vex ships scattered, clearly confused by the sudden aggression from a ship they had considered harmless. They're trying to regroup, Foster said, watching the tactical display. But our jammers are keeping them from coordinating their attacks. Reed nodded. Each captain has to make decisions alone now. Let's see how good they are without their fancy networks. 2 of the Vex ships moved to intercept the Relic, while the other 3 tried to circle around behind. They're targeting our engines, the sensor officer called out. Helm, evasive pattern Delta, Reed ordered. Wilson, how are we doing on that railgun? 15 more minutes, Captain, Wilson replied from engineering. I'm trying to reroute power to speed up the charging process. The Relic shuddered as the first enemy shots hit its hull. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Damage to outer hull sections 12 through 15, reported a crewman. No breach yet. Reed studied the tactical display. Their weapons are powerful, but they're designed to cut through energy shields, not solid metal. Our old armor is buying us time. The relic turned hard, its old engines straining against the forces. One of the Vex ships couldn't adjust quickly enough and passed close alongside. Point defense batteries, fire at will, Reed commanded. The small defensive guns that Wilson had reactivated opened fire, peppering the passing Vex ship with projectiles. Most bounced off its shields, but a few found weak points. Minor damage to their sensor array, Foster reported with satisfaction. Captain, called the communications officer, one of the Vex ships is hailing us. On screen, Reed ordered. A different Vex commander appeared, looking far less confident than Crix had been. Human vessel, you have destroyed Admiral Crix's ship through some trickery. Surrender now, or we will. Reed cut the transmission. They're trying to distract us while they position their ships. Foster, any chance we can use our jammers more selectively? Foster thought for a moment. The old systems aren't precise, but we might be able to create a directional effect. Focus the jamming on 4 ships, but leave one able to communicate. Reed smiled. Confusion in the ranks. Do it. As Foster worked on the jammers, the relic took more hits. The bridge shook violently, and a console exploded in sparks. Hull breach on deck 6, shouted a crewman. Emergency bulkheads activated. Casualties? Reed asked. 3 injured, no fatalities. Damage control teams responding. Reed gripped his chair as another hit rocked the ship. We can't keep this up forever. Wilson, update on the railgun. 10 minutes, Captain. The power systems are handling more than they were designed for. One of the younger officers looked worried. Sir, even with the railgun, we can only take out 1 more ship. That leaves 4. Reed didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the movements of the Vex ships. 4 were now moving erratically, changing course and firing at random intervals. But 1 ship, the one they had left unaffected by the jammers, was moving with purpose, trying to direct the others with light signals and visual cues. There, Reed said, pointing. That ship is taking command. When the railgun is ready, that's our target. Foster looked up from her console. Sir, I've been going through the relic's archives. I found something interesting. Old war logs from the first conflicts with the Vex ancestors 2 centuries ago. What about them? Reed asked, bracing himself as another hit shook the ship. They detail tactics used against the early Vex ships, Foster explained quickly. According to these records, Vex ships of that era had a critical weakness. Their propulsion systems couldn't handle rapid pressure changes. That was centuries ago, Reed pointed out. Surely they've fixed that by now. Maybe not, Foster said. Look at the design similarities. She pulled up a comparison between the old Vex ships from the archives and scans of the current ones. The basic engine configuration is nearly identical. They've upgraded the technology, but the fundamental design remains the same. Reed studied the images. What exactly are you suggesting? We could create a controlled implosion near their engines. The sudden pressure wave might disable them without destroying the ships completely. And how do we create this implosion? Foster hesitated. We'd need to eject some of our fuel cells and detonate them at exactly the right moment. Reed considered this. That's risky, if we misjudge the timing. It's risky, Foster agreed, but so is facing 5 advanced warships with our limited weapons. Another hit rocked the ship hard enough to throw several crew members to the floor. Multiple hull breaches, called the damage control officer. Sections 20 through 24 exposed to vacuum. Seal those sections, Reed ordered. What's our status, Wilson? Railgun at 70% charge, Captain. 8 more minutes, but we're losing power in some systems due to damage. Reed made his decision. Prepare 3 fuel cells for ejection. Target the area between those 2 Vex ships. He pointed to the display where two enemy vessels were moving close to each other. The crew worked quickly, despite the continuing barrage from the Vex ships. The relic groaned under the assault, its old structure taking punishment that would have destroyed a modern vessel. "Fuel cells ready for ejection," reported the weapons officer. "On my mark," Reed said, watching the enemy ships carefully. 3, 2, 1, mark. The fuel cells shot away from the relic, small specks against the vast darkness of space. They drifted toward the gap between the two Vex ships. "Detonate on my command," Reed ordered. He waited, counting the seconds as the distance closed. One of the Vex ships noticed the fuel cells and started to turn away. "Now," Reed shouted. The fuel cells exploded in a silent flash of light. The shockwave rippled outward, invisible in the vacuum, but devastating in its effect. It caught both Vex ships, washing over their hulls and creating rapid pressure changes around their engine sections. The results were immediate and dramatic. Both ships lost power, their lights flickering out as they began to drift aimlessly. A cheer went up from the relic's crew. "Two ships disabled," Foster confirmed. "Their engines are completely offline." Reed allowed himself a brief smile before turning serious again. "That still leaves 3. And they'll be more cautious now." As if to confirm his words, the remaining Vex ships pulled back, keeping their distance while still firing at the relic. "They're adapting," Reed noted, "learning to respect us." Wilson's voice came over the comm. "Railgun charged and ready, Captain." Reed nodded. "Target the command ship we identified earlier. Let's see how they function without leadership." The relic turned, bringing its most powerful weapon to bear on the enemy commander. Despite the damage it had taken, the old ship moved with determined purpose. "Target locked," said the weapons officer. Reed took a deep breath. "Fire." The railgun fired with a thunderous vibration that shook the entire ship. The massive tungsten rod streaked across space, leaving a brief trail of superheated particles in its wake. The Vex command ship tried to evade, engines flaring as it turned sharply. But the old weapon was built for targets that could dodge. The projectile struck the Vex ship just off-center, tearing through its sleek hull like paper. The enemy vessel didn't explode dramatically. Instead, it simply broke apart, pieces spinning away into the darkness of space. "Direct hit," reported the weapons officer, her voice steady despite the tension. "Target destroyed." Reed nodded, his face grim. He took no joy in the deaths of the Vex crew, but they had left him no choice. Status of the remaining ships. "The 2 we disabled earlier are still drifting," Foster said, checking her sensors. "The other 2 are pulling back. They seem to be retreating." Reed watched the tactical display as the 2 functional Vex ships accelerated away from the battle. Without their commander or the ability to communicate properly, they had lost their advantage. "Let them go," Reed said. "We still have a colony to protect." The bridge crew worked steadily, assessing damage and rerouting systems. The relic had taken a beating. Smoke filled some sections, and the emergency lighting flickered in parts of the ship where power was unstable. "Damage report," Reed ordered. "Multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 7, reported a crewman. "All sealed by emergency bulkheads. Life support at 72% capacity. Main engines operating at 61% efficiency. Railgun offline." The power surge from that last shot burned out several key components. Wilson's voice came over the comm. "Captain, we have repair teams working, but this old girl has taken about all she can handle. Another serious hit might break her back." Reed rubbed his tired eyes. "Understood. Let's hope we don't need tow." "Captain," the communications officer cut in. "We're being hailed by one of the disabled Vex ships." "On screen," Reed ordered. The face that appeared was another Vex officer, but one with different markings than Crick's. This one looked both angry and confused. "Human vessel," the Vex said stiffly. "I am Sub-Commander Vex of the Expansion Fleet. You have destroyed our flagship and disabled my ship. How is this possible? Reed straightened in his chair. Your fleet made a mistake, Sub-Commander. You judged a ship by its age rather than its capabilities, and you judged humans by our politics rather than our resolve. The Vex officer's eyes narrowed. Your vessel is primitive. Our scans showed minimal weapons, yet you have defeated 4 of our most advanced warships. Perhaps, Reed suggested, you should have studied your history. The relic may be old, but it was built to fight and survive. Sometimes the old ways still work. The Vex was quiet for a moment. What are your terms? Terms. For our surrender, the Vex clarified. We cannot fight in our current condition. What do you demand of us? Reed hadn't expected this. He looked at Foster, who seemed equally surprised. You will leave this system immediately, Reed said firmly. You will take no action against Haven Colony or any other human settlement, and you will deliver a message to your leaders. Human space is protected. The Vex gave a short nod. We require assistance to restart our engines. Foster will transmit the frequency that will allow your systems to reboot, Reed said. But be warned, we'll be watching you leave. After the transmission ended, Reed slumped slightly in his chair. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him suddenly aware of how close they had come to destruction. Sir, Foster said quietly, sensors are picking up new ships entering the system. Reed tensed. More Vex. No, Foster said, breaking into a smile. Human signatures, a lot of them. It's a fleet battle group. The communications officer called out, we're being hailed by the HSA Defender. It's Admiral Jenkins. The screen showed a stern-faced woman in a crisp modern uniform. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw the damaged bridge of the relic. Captain Reed, she said, what in God's name happened here? We picked up reports of a battle and came at maximum speed. Reed managed a tired smile. Just a disagreement with some Vex ships. Admiral, they didn't think much of our old relic. We had to change their minds. Jenkins looked at something off-screen, then back at Reed with newfound respect. Our scans show 2 destroyed Vex warships, 2 disabled, and 2 retreating at high speed. Are you telling me your ceremonial ship did all this? We had some help from good engineering and old war tactics, Reed admitted. The relic may be old, but she still knows how to fight. Remarkable, Jenkins said. We've been receiving scattered reports of Vex attacks on frontier colonies, but this is the first solid evidence. How bad is the situation on Haven? The colony took heavy damage, but most civilians made it to the shelters. They'll need assistance with rebuilding. Reed hesitated, then added, Admiral, the Vex mentioned that some council officials have been paid to ignore these attacks. That might explain why no one has responded until now. Jenkins's expression hardened. I see. Rest assured, Captain, that will be investigated thoroughly. She paused. What's the status of your ship? Wilson spoke up from where he was working on a damaged console. She's hurt bad. Admiral, but nothing that can't be fixed. The old ships were built to be repaired, not replaced. Good, Jenkins said with a nod. Because I'm officially rescinding your decommissioning orders, Captain Reed. The relic has proven its worth today. Once repairs are complete, I want you to lead a task force back to these frontier colonies. Find out what's happening and put a stop to it. Reed straightened in his chair. It would be an honor, Admiral. After the transmission ended, the bridge was quiet for a moment. Then Foster spoke up. So much for becoming a museum piece. Reed smiled, running his hand along the worn metal of his chair's armrest. Some things aren't meant to be put behind glass. Some things are meant to keep doing what they were built for. The relic drifted toward the approaching fleet ships, its battered hull bearing the scars of battle like medals of honor. From the colony below, small ships began to rise into orbit, people coming to see their savior with their own eyes. In the governor's office on Haven, Representative Davis appeared on the screen, his perfect suit now rumpled, and his expression anxious. Governor Bell, what happened? We received reports of a battle, but you didn't expect anyone to survive to tell about it. Bell cut in coldly, like the other colonies that were attacked while the council looked the other way. Davis paled. I don't know what you mean. Save it for the investigation, Bell said. Admiral Jenkins is very interested in how the Vex knew which colonies to target and why no help was sent. This is absurd, Davis sputtered. And that old ship, the Relic, what happened to it? Bell smiled. It did what it was built to do. It fought. It won. He leaned closer to the screen. They called it obsolete. They mocked it for being old. Then it annihilated their fleet. On the bridge of the Relic, as repair teams worked around him, Captain Reed looked out at the stars. The old ship hummed beneath his feet, damaged but unbroken. Not bad for a museum piece, he said quietly to himself. Not bad at all.